So starting off in S tier, we have Kate Bishop, and she just seems to work in every single Battlegrounds meta. There isn't a recent one where she hasn't been good on attack. She's really versatile because her main damage source is Cold Snap, and not many champions are immune to that. And even if they are, there's a good chance they're not immune to bleed as well. So she can just switch to the Caltrops arrow and do damage that way. She's also one of the faster champions in game, finishing most fights in about 40-50 seconds. She could do fights like Korg, really safe thanks to the evade on parry that she has, and she stuns the opponent after she does that, as most of you know. And she has some really nice utility. She stops evade with her cold snap, so she can counter champions like Nightcrawler, even though she has class disadvantage. She can easily take Maestro. She's just a really versatile champion who's really fast, and she's not bad on defense. She's definitely not the best defender, but you can't parry her, so you do have to look for intercepts, and that slows you down or makes you bait heavy attacks. And if you're baiting heavy attacks, you're going to take some block damage. Very solid attacker, decent defender, well deserves the S tier in my opinion. And the only other champion we got in S tier is Bullseye. Now Bullseye is not great on attack, as we all know. He can finish the fights, he won't time out, but he's definitely not an attacker. He is a defender, and he's a bullshit defender. If you're not using a bleed immune champ, you're going to take loads of unavoidable damage if you dex him, if you bait his SB1, and you can't bait his SB2. His SB2 is dexable, but you can't bait his SB2 unless you have an evade counter. You have to bait the SB1s, so you do take a lot of unavoidable damage. If you're using a bleed immune champ, he's still going to slow you down, because once he gets to that bar of power, he's going to have his evade charge, and he's still going to evade you. And if he does evade you, it's a counter attack, so he can hit you with a combo and take off half your health easily. He still crits through block, so his SB1 still slaps on your block against bleed immune champions. So the best counters to Bullseye are bleed immune champs who can counter evade, and there's really not many champions like that. The first one that comes to mind is Iceman, and Iceman's not the fastest champ in the game unless you get really lucky on your crits. So the best counter to him isn't going to be that fast. There's a few champs who can take Bullseye really well, of course, like Archangel if you get good RNG, like Sunspot, like OG Storm. But there's a good chance he just randomly throws an SB1 and takes off half your health. Bishop is a very good counter to him, but even with Bishop, there's a good chance Bullseye will just throw a random SB1 and take off about 5 to 10% of your health. So he's a really strong defender. I'm sure most of you know this, especially if you fought a 7-star Bullseye. It just straight isn't fair. I'm hoping he gets nerfed at least a little bit, to be honest. So moving on to A tier, we have Nick. And I did have Nick in the S tier at first, but then I thought about it. There are champions what can now nuke Nick in 30 seconds, being Danny Moonstar. So there's 2 champions who can cancel his second life. There are also plenty of champions that can now kill Nick Fury in under a minute. There's Hulkling, there's Crossbones, there's Nightcrawler. Even random champions like Nova, Valkyrie, Massacre can do him in 60 seconds. Blackcat can do him in under a minute. There's so many champions that can kill Nick Fury in a minute or less. So he's no longer that defender what is definitely going to stall out your opponent. He used to be an automatic draft, because no matter what, even if your opponent was really good, Nick would just stall out the fight. Nick a lot of the time would cause timeouts, and that rarely happens anymore. He's not that defender anymore. He's still a very solid defender, and he still messes people up because he can throw a random SB1 and do a lot of block damage to you, or just throw too many SB1s and go unblockable. He can hit you with a combo, and if he hits you with that light ender, he's going to kill you if you're not using the bleed immune. So he's still a very solid defender, and he is really underrated on attack, but you do need to be running 5-5 deep wounds. If you run 5-5 deep wounds, he is actually pretty fast. He can kill Kindreds and Bullseyes and finish 100% health, and he can kill them in about 40-50 seconds. He's good for random champions like Shuri. Basically any champion that can bleed, Nick can do it. So yeah, Nick isn't the be-all, end-all defender that he used to be. He's not a must draft now as soon as you see him, but he is definitely a must-have for the deck still. And he still deserves the A spot. He's just fallen out of S tier in my opinion. Moving on to Korg, and he is good every single meta. So I was debating putting him in S tier, And the reason for that is he will make it to your deck every single meta, because there's not one where he is bad on defense. At the very least, he can stall out your opponent because of his rock stacks, reducing all that damage. There are a lot of counters to Korg, and there are a lot of champions that can finish fights against Korg 100% easily. And there are many players who have gotten better at fighting Korg, better at doing the light intercepts, so they can nuke Korg with random champions. But even against really good players, Korg can still mess them up. He can still stall out the fight. He still makes it to everyone's deck, every single meta, so he easily deserves the A spot. I don't think he's a S tier champion, because there are plenty of champions who can nuke him, and he's not useful on offense at all, unless you're fighting like a Quicksilver, I suppose, but he's not really a common defender anymore. So yeah, Korg, solid A tier, useful defender every meta. We'll move on now. Okay, so Mantis is probably the most widely known photon counter. I think she's, like Shuri, is the most widely accepted domino counter. Mantis is the most widely accepted photon counter. Everyone has one of her in the deck to nuke photons, but she can still nuke plenty of champions as long as you can apply your debuffs. She can get her mixed emotions, and it doesn't matter if they're stun immune or not, because her sleep is not a stun. So she is pretty versatile. As long as she can apply her debuffs, she can nuke many champions on offense. And on defense, she is pretty good. If she throws an SB1, she'll put an encroaching sleep on you, and if you don't use the special attack at the right time, she will apply that sleep to you, and you will get hit. It doesn't matter if you're using a stun immune champ either, because sleep is not a stun. So if she uses her SB1, she can cause a lot of troubles on defense. You can't reliably parry her, so that leads to excessive block damage. And because you want to push her to a special 2, that makes you want to hold block when she gets to a bar of power to make sure she doesn't throw a special 1. So you do end up taking a bit of block damage fighting Mantis. So she is a pretty solid defender, and on attack she's pretty versatile. One of the best photon counters. She's very fast, so yeah, well deserving of the A tier, maybe even the S tier, but I'll let you decide. What do you think? Do you think Mantis should move up to the S tier? I think she's a solid A tier. We'll move on to the next champ, which is Massacre now, and he's not a defender at all, but he's very versatile on attack. He works most metas. Even against Incinerate immunes, he still does that massive block damage with the SB2, and he still does burst damage on top of that. So he's very versatile. He doesn't just rely on Incinerate damage, but he's not a defender at all. And he does have a bit of a skill cap. You do need to know how to finesse the opponent into blocking that SB2, so you don't take extra time using Massacre. You can play him spamming the SB1, but that's a lot slower. Of the SB1, Massacre does have some nice ability accuracy reduction, and that helps him take fights like Hulkling, Herc, Thing much better. So he's very versatile in attack, but he does take a bit of practice. So yeah, very solid, versatile attacker, solid A tier. We'll move on to Killmonger now, and Killmonger, he can do some things in attack, especially if he's duped. He has some decent damage, but he is a defender. Now, the thing is with Killmonger, he was much scarier on defense when he first came out. If this was a tier list when 7 stars first came out, he would probably be in S tier. He was that good of a defender. But there's a lot more counters to him, and there's a lot of champions that can nuke him now. CGR and Guardian do him fast, but if you don't get a counter for Killmonger, there's a good chance you're going to time out, because he has that massive critical resistance, which just stops a lot of champions from doing a lot of damage, especially using a 6-star, because the higher challenger rating plus the extra critical resistance of Killmonger just makes it very unlikely that you'll crit if you're using a 6-star against a 7-star Killmonger. And a lot of the metas recently, he has been pretty tough on defense, tougher than usual, so I think he has earned his A spot. There are a few champions that can nuke him, like I already said. CGR, Gallon, plus Kate can all do him in well under a minute, but he's a very solid defender, so yeah, we'll leave him at the A spot for now. Maybe he'll go down to B in the future if I decide to keep doing these tier lists. But now, Blackcat. I slept on Blackcat for the longest time. She's not the best defender, but she can have some small uses on defense, especially if you need to intercept her, because while she's awakened, if you try to intercept Blackcat, she's going to evade. So if it's a meta where you need to intercept, she can be a sneaky defender. But of course, the reason she's up this high is because she's really strong on attack. She has some of the strongest ability accuracy reduction in the game, which helps her counter champs like Thing and Falcon with ease. She's very fast. I've seen her kill rank 3 sassies as a 6-star ascended in under a minute. That is crazy. The biggest health pool in game, rank 3 Sasquatches, using a 6-star ascended in under a minute. She can kill champions like Thing and Falcon in around 40-50 seconds. She can kill Nick Fury in well under a minute. As long as the champion can bleed, she will be pretty fast. And if there's abilities to fail with her ability accuracy reduction, she's going to be really quick. She's a really solid attacker, pretty versatile, and she's extremely fast, and she shuts off a lot of stuff with her ability accuracy reduction. So I think she deserves the A tier. Let me know what you guys think on Blackcat, because I was sleeping on her for a very long time. Okay, and moving on to crossbones, the only reason this man is in S tier, because in any meta crossbones works in, he is an S tier champ. The only reason he isn't in there is because there has been a few metas where he hasn't worked. So to be fair, I had to leave him out of S tier because there has been a few metas where you just couldn't use crossbones. But if he worked every single meta, he would have been in S tier, and if he continues to be good for metas going forward, he will definitely move up to S tier. He is one of the fastest champs in game. In his ideal matchups like science champs like Photon, like Thing, he can do them in under 30 seconds. You can kill Photons in 22 seconds with crossbones. And he nukes any hero champions very fast, 30 to 40 second fights. He can kill Nick Fury in well under a minute. He's one of the fastest champions in game. He's very versatile as well. Him being reliant on Fury buffs does not hold him back. He can take a lot of Mystic champions. I don't want to keep going on about Crossbones because I would be here all day. I made a how to use Crossbones to his full potential, and that video also shows his best matchups and everything he can do in Battlegrounds. So if you want to learn more about Crossbones, definitely go check that out. That was my favourite video I've ever made, and yeah, he's well deserving of the A tier. He can be a decent defender because he can shrug the debuffs, so you can't reliably parry him. And if your opponent relies on applying debuffs, they're going to struggle against Crossbones on defense. But there's no reason you would want to put him on defense because he's such a fast and versatile attacker. But yeah, that's enough about Crossbones. Let's move on to B tier. Okay, so if you watch my channel, you know I hate stealthy. You all know it, but I am trying to make these lists as unbiased as possible. I really am, and this is my unbiased opinion on stealthy. I'm going to be completely serious here. Yes, he is one of the fastest attackers in games in the matches he works for, but is he actually good for many of the actual tough defenders? Like, let's say Photon, for example. You can take Photon with stealthy, but if you take a single blocked hit off Photon, that's 10% of your health gone, and you need to know exactly when to knock her down with the SP1, and you need to wait out the blue light form perfectly, so it's not an easy match. You can nuke Korg with stealthy, but you have to be a very skilled player and be skilled with the light intercepts. Sure, he can nuke Fam, but if you just get unlucky and Fam gains loads of armor up buffs, he can also time out in that matchup. He's also reliant on debuffs like Mantis's, but the difference is you can put Mantis on defense. You can't put stealthy on defense. And before all of you start the Starkey versus stealthy debate, yes, Starkey was in A tier and stealthy is in B tier. And let me tell you the exact reason why. Starkey is a lot more versatile than stealthy because he doesn't rely on any debuffs. Starkey's a lot safer to use than stealthy because he has the power drain and the taunt. But to be fair to stealthy, in the matchups he works for, he can finish fights in under 30 seconds. And if you're a skilled player, you can do fights like Photon and Korg extremely fast with him. So he is very versatile if you're skilled at playing stealthy. But he's a very squishy champion and he's not good on defense and he's reliant on debuffs. So I think B tier is the perfect tier for him. Let me know what you think on stealthy. Serious opinions though, because I'm not joking here. You know I love to joke about stealthy and call him trash, but this is me being unbiased. I want to hear serious opinions on him. He's definitely not going to S tier, so I don't want to hear you commenting that, JS. He's not going to S tier. Maybe a promotion to A tier, but I think he is a B tier champ, and that's my unbiased opinion on him. We'll move on to Attuma now. If this was a tier list when Attuma first got buffed, he would easily be in S tier, because when he got buffed there was a lot of nuke metas, so the chip damage what Attuma was doing to people would cost everyone the matchups. He was one of the scarier defenders. There was hardly any counters to him that could come out 100% health. But nowadays there are a lot tougher metas in Battlegrounds, so even the top players are finishing fights with lower health nowadays. So Attuma is a pretty easy champion to fight. He just does unavoidable chip damage, and the chip damage hasn't been enough to win most people matchups nowadays. Like, if you use Hulkling against Attuma or Juggernaut or any nuke champion, you can finish the fight about 90-85% health, and he's easy to nuke in about 30-40 seconds, and oftentimes that's enough to win you the match, because the metas are a lot tougher now, and there's a lot tougher defenders like Bullseye and Serpent doing more unavoidable damage to people. So Attuma has fell off a bit, but he will always be valuable because of that unavoidable damage, especially if nuke metas come back. Whenever it's a nuke meta, Attuma will always be one of the best defenders, because those metas are easy, so lots of people don't take damage in those metas, so chip damage is very, very important. So yeah, I think he's a solid B tier champ. He's got some use on offense. He doesn't time out in fights, and he can do some interesting things. Like, he can fight Maestro. I have done Maestros with Attuma before, and he can finish science champions like Scorpion decently fast. But yeah, he's definitely not an attacker. He's just a decent defender, especially in nuke metas. They're the best times you want to put him on defense. In tougher metas, he's not the best defender though. Moving on to Valk. In the metas she works, she's a very versatile attacker who's very safe to use thanks to her playstyle, just hitting into block, and she finishes fights really fast. I haven't got much to say about Valk. She's just a very fast champion. She's pretty versatile, and the meta she works in, she's a very solid attacker. The AI can screw you over if it's too aggressive, and that's why she's only in B tier. Plus, she's not the best defender. She can be an okay defender because she will randomly shrug off your parries sometimes, but most of the time she's just going to get nuked on defense. But yeah, she's a very versatile attacker, pretty fast as well. So I think most people would agree with Valkyrie being in the B spot. We all know that she counters unstoppable and all that. We don't need to go over that. So let's just move on to Jabroni next. And Ghost has made some really good videos on Jabari. If it wasn't for him, Jabari would probably be in the C or D tier. But he's definitely shown us that Jabari is a very solid Battlegrounds champion. She can counter champions like Bullseye and Falcon well. She's pretty fast and pretty versatile as long as the opponent can be bled. She does some very, very solid damage. You can use her against Mystic champions as long as they don't nullify her Fury buff, because that's the only buff she will gain. So yeah, she's a very solid champ. She can be a sneaky defender as well, because if she throws that SB1, she'll put down snare on you, and then that means you can't dex. Well, there's a chance your dex will fail. So if you do dex, there's a chance you'll get hit by the SB1, and if you don't dex, you're going to have to take that block damage. So she can be a bit of a sneaky defender, even though she has a small health pool. So I think she's well deserving of the B spot. Next up we got Kingpin, and I'm sure most of the people who don't play high tier Battlegrounds are going to be going crazy, but Kingpin is not the fastest champion game. He does finish fights 100% health because he has that nice willpower healing, but he's just not fast enough to compete with a lot of the top Battlegrounds attackers. Honestly, I was debating putting him in C tier, but the reason he's in B tier is any metas where there's debuffs, of course he's really fast and he can compete with the top Battlegrounds attackers then. And despite him not being the fastest attacker, he is very safe to use because he has that damage reduction and that willpower healing, so you will come out 100% health in most fights, and he is pretty versatile. It's just he does not do enough damage to compete with the top Battlegrounds attackers, and he's not the best defender anymore. There are plenty of champions that nuke Kingpin: Chavez, Hulkling, Garland, Starkey, Crossbones. I could go on forever. Plenty of champions that nuke Kingpin. So yeah, I think B tier is the spot for him. He might even go down in the future. But let me know what you think of Kingpin. Let me know if I've done him dirty, because I know a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but I think a lot of the top Battlegrounds players who, you know, place in Celestial or even Mysterium, I think they'd agree with this placement. So yeah, let's move on to Cheetler. Cheetler is a very decent champ. She has that nice unstoppable counter off her SP1. It basically turns her into Valkyrie. Once she throws her SP1, she'll gain a passive on herself, and that passive lets her counter unstoppable. So that's very nice. She's just not the fastest on attack. She can finish champions that are hashtag gamma very fast, but most champions are not hashtag gamma. The only notable champions that are Hulk and Sasquatch. She can finish Sasquatch in around 60 seconds, Hulk in around 30 seconds. But on average, she can finish science matchups very fast. But any other matchups, she's definitely not the fastest, and she definitely will lose you the matchup on time if you try to use her. But she can be a decent defender. You can't block any other attacks because she will apply a bleed to you. Well, you can block them if you're using the bleed immune, but she also has that cleanse, so you can't use a champion that relies on debuffs. And she has very long special attacks, so that wastes time in the matchup. So she is a solid defender. She's a solid attacker, just not the fastest around, but she has some nice utility with the cleanse and the counter unstoppable, and she can do some important matchups like Sasquatch fast, counter science champions, and she's a decent defender, so I think she deserves the B spot. Moleman can be a very good defender if your opponent doesn't have a mutant champ, because he's going to shrug any stun debuffs or any debuffs in general that you apply to him. So you can't stun him reliably, and you can't hit this man's block because he's going to go unstoppable. So that makes it so you have to bait out a lot of heavy attacks, which means you'll take block damage, or you have to be on point with your intercepts. His special attack animations are quite long as well, so that stalls for time. So he's a pretty decent defender. He's also got a pretty big health pool. He's pretty tanky, and he's actually very solid on attack. He's really fast in science matchups. As long as the opponent can bleed, he will take the fight pretty fast. He's just bleed reliant, so he's not the most versatile, but any matchup that can bleed, yeah, he does some very good damage. He can kill Nick Furies in 60 seconds. Any science matchups in around 30-40 seconds. Any match that can bleed in general in around 50 seconds, I'd say. He's a very solid dual use champ for Battlegrounds. I really hope he comes out as a 7-star. I think that would push him into A tier, to be honest with you. But that's it for B tier. Let's move on to C. So Elsa, she has no real use on defense nowadays. She used to be a pretty good defender because back in the day, suicide was actually pretty popular in Battlegrounds, believe it or not. So Elsa was actually a very solid defender, but of course they're not popular in Battlegrounds anymore. So Elsa has no use on defense. But ever since, I started hating on Elsa, people have shown me that she can be good on offense. She can be a very good counter for Falcon, and a lot of people rely on her for that. She can be a good counter to Thing. She can finish a lot of matchups pretty fast. So I think she deserves a C tier. I think she's a solid champion, solid attacker, just not a good defender. I wouldn't put her in my deck, but a lot of people have had success with her, and she was very good in a few metas, like the Safeguard meta, for example. So yeah, we'll put Elsa in C tier. I think she's earned that. Next champ, we got Shang-Chi, and I made a showcase on Shang-Chi. He's very solid in metas where you need to counter unstoppable or you need to purify stuff. But in general, he's just not a good defender, and he's not fast enough on attack to be worth putting in your deck because he's not a dual use champion. So I just think he's not the best Battlegrounds champion unless there's a meta where you need his utility. Like there's a meta where you need to counter evade or unstoppable, or you need to purify stuff. If there's a meta like that, he's definitely worth putting in your deck because he does have some solid damage. He can finish fights decently fast. He's just not fast enough to compete with the top Battlegrounds attackers. So that's Shang. I think he deserves the C tier. If you want to learn more about Shang in Battlegrounds, did make a showcase video on him, so check that out if you want. Next champ, we got Falcon, and I had him in D tier at first, but a lot of people rely on Falcon to counter science champions like Falcon and Things, so I decided to move him up to C tier. But if you try to use Falcon in a non-science matchup, there's a good chance you will time out. He is definitely at the bottom of C tier. I'm not a fan of Falcon at all. His damage is awful, and his playstyle is just really bad for Battlegrounds. But he does have that 100% ability accuracy reduction, and he does counter science champions like Falcon and Thingwell, and he does do those matchups decently fast. So I will put him at C tier, but keep in mind he is at the bottom of C tier. I don't recommend you rank Falcon. I recommend you rank other champions with better ability accuracy reduction like blackcat, like crossbones. So yeah, that's my opinion on Falcon. We'll keep him in C for now, but next tier list, good chance he gets demoted because I'm not a fan of him at all, and most of the top Battlegrounds players aren't. No one who I speak to likes Falcon, And next champ, we got Zeemo, the last champ in C tier. So after this champ, you don't want to put any champion below C tier in your deck. Zeemo is the last of the good champions for Battlegrounds. So let's jump into it. I know I hate on Zeemo a lot, but he can be worth putting in your deck in some metas. There's a few metas where he has been good on defense, like the power snack meta, like the safeguard meta. So I can't fault him for that. And he is a very solid fault on counter. He's too slow on attack to be used in general, but he can counter fault on very well, and he does do her pretty fast if you get lucky on crit RNG. If you don't get lucky on crit RNG, it'll take about a minute though, but it's very safe, so you have to give Zeemo his props. Some metas, he's a decent defender, and he can be a very good fault on counter, so I figured he deserves the C tier. He might go down in the next tier list. Let me know what your opinions are on Zeemo, because he has been good in some metas, and some metas, a lot of the top Battlegrounds players are using him in his deck, so I figured he had to be put in at least C tier. Alright, so like all the other tier list videos, we're going to rush through the rest of these champs, because these are the mid champs for Battlegrounds. These are champions you do not want to put in your Battlegrounds deck. Maybe they're good for certain metas though, or maybe they have a good matchup, but yeah, let's rush through these. OG Black Panther can put out some very good damage, but he is bleed reliant and heavily AI reliant, because to get that massive SB2 you do need to land a perfect intercept. It's not like a Herc intercept, it needs to be a perfect intercept to get the guaranteed crits of the SB2, and you need to intercept a lot with Black Panther, so it's very risky playing him, and he has no use on defense, and he's reliant on bleed, so I can't put him higher than D. Moondragon, she was good in the safeguard meta, good counter for Falcon in the safeguard meta, but other than that I haven't seen her used at all. She can put out some decent damage, but she isn't a good defender at all. Other than the safeguard meta, haven't seen her do any other impressive fights, so I think D tier is definitely the spot for her. Maybe she can go up a tier if some people want to send me some impressive fights, because I haven't seen too much of her, but most of the people that I know that have a Moondragon took her out of deck as soon as the safeguard meta ended. So let me know your opinions on Moondragon. Maybe I'm underestimating her a bit. Ronin, not a good defender, can put out some decent damage output, that's about it. Squirrel Girl, not a good defender, reliant on bleed, can put out some decent damage output, that's about it. Karnak, the only meta you would want to put him in your deck is a invade meta, because he can crit through block. He is good for those metas, and a meta where you have to knock him down with a heavy attack, he could be good on defense because he reduces the stun duration, but his SB1 is pretty easy to counter with a heavy attack, so probably not. So yeah, Karnak mid, D tier. Hitmonkey, his damage output is pretty bad without suicide, like he doesn't even hit that hard, and he's got a very small health pool, too squishy to be a good defender, so D tier. He can finish science matchups fast, because against science champs his damage output is a lot better, but against any other champions he has very mid damage, and he's not a good defender, so D tier. Hawkeye can put out some good bleed damage, about it, not a good defender as we all know. Blade can put out some good bleed damage, not a good defender. BWDO is probably the most disappointing champion ever. I ranked her for the safeguard meta, a meta where you'd think she'd be a beast, but she wasn't fast enough for that, and she would lose me most matchups on time. Even in a meta you'd think she'd be perfect for. She's not a good defender, she's too slow on attack to be good. It's really sad, because when Battlegrounds first came out, she was one of the best attackers, but she hasn't aged well at all, so D tier for BWDO. Hope she gets a little buff in the future. For Rags, you have to get to an SB3 to do your damage. Not a good defender, unless it's a meta where you have to intercept him, because he does auto block on intercepts, but other than that he's a trash defender. Has pretty bad damage until you get to an SB3, and even then he's just not a fast champ at all, is he? Let's just skip 4 Rags, we all know he's bad. Taskmaster, I know there's a lot of Taskmaster fans out there, he has some interesting abilities, but realistically he's too difficult to play to be a good Battlegrounds attacker. His damage isn't reliable enough, and he's not a good defender, so E tier. OG Punisher could be annoying on defense because you can't dex his special attacks, about it. Night Thrasher, too slow to be good on attack. I'm pretty sure he needs synergies to be good on attack, and you can't have them in Battlegrounds, and he's a trash defender. Misty Knight has no damage. unless you go for a proper rotation. But if you go for a proper rotation, you won't get the guaranteed crits, and you won't get the unblockable, so you lose all your utility. She can be slightly annoying on defense because she can evade, but she gets nuked by pretty much every champion in the game. So yeah, E tier. Craven, as long as you bait the SB2, he's a very bad defender, and he gets nuked by most champions in the game. Too slow to be good on attack. Gwenpool can put out some decent bleed damage, I guess that's about it. Daredevil HK, awful damage, can stall on defense, I guess, because he has a long SB1 and can shrug parries, but it's about it. He's not a good defender, not a good attacker. OG Black Widow can technically be an annoying defender because she has that random evade, but nah, she get nuked on Battlegrounds defense, and she's a bad attacker because she has no damage. She does have that very strong ability accuracy reduction, but she's going to time out in most fights, so yeah, E tier. F tier are your meme champions and Aegon, because Aegon is the ramp up champion. Of course, he's not good in Battlegrounds, but yeah, that's going to be the end of the video, lads. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. And yeah, that's going to be the end of the video. Make sure to let me know if you want me to continue this series, and yeah, I'll see you next video.